You're listening to the Social Impact Show with me, Sam Marshall, and we often have conversations with really interesting individuals. Individuals that represent institutions, organizations, and some of the work that the institutions do, the work that they do, is really groundbreaking stuff. A couple of weeks ago, Food Lovers Market as a group, I think it was just at the start of winter, put out this call that they were going to collectively try and get to 10 million meals. That's feed the needy. Now, if you've ever been into a Food Lovers store, you know that they are currently running campaigns anyway, right? They've got the 50 cent towards a donation meal, but they've also been able to. And the last time I had a chat to this gentleman, the numbers were astronomical. It was, I think, like over 7 million meals provided, or over 7 million rand raised. I'll get a clarification from him now. But joining me in this conversation is Andrew Millson. And Andrew Millson is head of sustainability at Food Lovers Market, right? This is such a big milestone. The target was 10 million. You hit it by 16 million. How do you feel about the fact that this was your organization that has contributed in such a meaningful way? And maybe let me prefix it also by saying that the 16 million meals raised is not in isolation of the current crisis we're facing.
No. Look, I think, Sam, that, how do I feel about the organization doing it? I'm incredibly proud. I'm incredibly proud to be a part of the brand. I'm incredibly proud that, it's not me pushing it. It's coming from Brian. It's coming from the board. And where did the meals come from? Well, they didn't just come from us. They came from everyone involved with the Food Lovers Market group, from our suppliers, from our customers, from our colleagues, to walk into a store during World Hunger Month and to see the cashiers so involved and so bought in and really pushing to raise so many meals, to hear it spoken about at all the team meetings, that's what really fills me with pride, that it's not one team, some sustainability team pushing this and trying to raise meals. This actually went to the whole collective, everybody involved within the group and associated with the group to raise those meals. So I think I'm incredibly proud of that fact. I think, what you mentioned before, we live in a country where, there's so much divide and there's so much inequality, and there's so many different factors for that inequality. Just nutrition at a young age makes such a difference to brain development. And there are so many people that don't have the privileges that I've had growing up and having access to food all the time, and therefore the development that goes with that. And if we really want to fight inequality, it starts really with a meal for a child who is struggling to eat. So, I think that there's so much more work to do on this, not just in the raising of meals, but actually raising in awareness around, for everybody. And that's why I think we have a huge influence and a huge part to play, is raising the awareness amongst our customers, amongst our suppliers, amongst everybody that we touch, that hunger is a real issue in South Africa. And we all have to fight hunger. And it's not just by providing meals. There's other programs that we run as well, which are more long-term, like our Seeds of Change project at the moment, where we're really encouraging entrepreneurs and trying to get them into our supply chain, so that they in turn can create jobs and everything else that goes with that. So I think it's a massive collective effort, and it makes me incredibly proud how everybody came together to create this.
And the reason I'm asking that question specifically about you, because I want people to understand, and I've been on this mission now for the last couple of months, to really highlight the individuals behind these projects. They don't just magically spring up from nowhere. They are driven by people, by their passion. They identify things, they want to solve things, and that is still people-centric at the heart of it, and I think that's very, very important. That probably is also the perfect segue then to ask you about what does it say about the conscious consumers who've contributed to this? Because it yet again proves that South Africans have big hearts, that they want to roll up their sleeves, they want to get involved. They might not sometimes know how to do it, but when a project comes along, not only this, like you've said before, there's the Seed for Change program, but other than this target, you do currently run a project in your stores where you can contribute 50 cents to a meal for someone else. That has been wildly successful as well. But what does it say about your customer base, your consumer base, and this idea that we have to push conscious consumers? We have to have the type of consumers that are connected.
Sam, I think you nailed it. I think so many people in our country actually want to do something, but don't know how. So I think all we did here was we offered a platform for them to be able to do it. And I think people often don't know how, and also they don't, sometimes, some of the feedback we've had, they don't trust what the money goes towards.
Yeah.
So I've got to give credit here as well to Food Forward South Africa, because they've been partners of ours since day one on this. And, you know, the work that they do, and you talk about people that are really creating a difference in communities. Food Forward works daily with literally thousands of NPOs and millions of South Africans, providing meals to them from the food that they've collected from retailers, other retailers, and of course ourselves. And so I think the platform that we provided and the trust through such an amazing partner like Food Forward are kind of two of the reasons that it has been so successful. And what does it say about our customers, and what does it say about South Africa? I think people want to contribute. People want to be able to play a role in creating a better future for everybody. And I think it's essential. You know, it's absolutely essential. We all know that. And yet sometimes we're a little bit paralyzed by what to do and the scale of it. But with 50 cents, and, you know, a lot of people say, yeah, but what is this actually going to do? Well, all those... Yeah, exactly. But all of those created those 16 million meals. You know, the biggest question we had was, it's actually 47 cents. And they said, what kind of a meal are they getting for 47 cents? And it's a great question. But actually the reason it's 47 cents for a meal is because of the great work that Food Forward do. So it's effectively their distribution costs. It's a cost that the 47 cents is how much it costs them for each meal, which I think they use as like 300 grams a meal, to distribute to people in South Africa. So they get the food that is, not going to be sold, etc., from the different retailers, and then that's what it costs them for each of the meals that they distribute. So that's why it's 47 cents. So the children in particular, and all the people in the communities they serve, are getting a wholesome meal for such a small amount of money that it's costing Food Forward, because of how efficient Food Forward is in what they do. So again, I'm just incredibly grateful to them for this.
I love that you explained it, because I did not explain it that way. Now you've given me a way to explain it to people when they ask about that 47 cents. One of the things that it would be remiss of me not to mention is that this campaign also deals with two other important things that I think is really, really important. And that we know that there's lots of conversations, there's conferences about it, but I still think, very anecdotally, it hasn't really struck the hearts and minds of ordinary South Africans. And I include myself in that. Two important things. One, food insecurity, which we are talking about because of this campaign. And then food recovery, which is another conversation that I don't think we talk about often.
Well, absolutely. I think, food recovery is such an important part of this process. So there is so much food available in our world, and yet there are hungry people. And we live in a world with AI. We put people on the moon. We do all these amazing things, and yet we cannot feed our populations. And that's not just in South Africa. That's in many countries that across the world. So something is not right there. And I think what organizations like Food Forward do is they look at how can they really rectify that issue. what is the solution here? And one of the solutions they have is this collection of food that is still edible, that is still good, for human consumption. And how can they use their resources to distribute that through the nonprofit organizations they work with to vulnerable communities? And I think food recovery is such a massive part of the whole food security question that we have. Because, you know, every human being should have the right to healthy nutrition. Every human being. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We know that that's not the case. And like I said earlier on, that has such an impact on just the developmental needs of the human body. So, you know, from such an early age, those who are not able to access nutrition, like I've been fortunate enough to be able to do, are at a disadvantage immediately. And that is completely not fair. That is creating inequality from the moment somebody is born, or even before they're born, when they're still in the womb. You know, how do we feed those moms, those expectant moms, to make sure that they are able to nourish their soon-to-be born infant? And then when that child is born, how do we make sure that those children across our country are able to feed themselves or to be fed in a way that really encourages their brain development, so we can decrease that gap, that inequality gap, and we can give everybody a fighting chance? Because, you know, that's what this country needs. There's such a wealth of talent in our country. And, you know, I often, you talk about, you know, so for example, education. I often say, you know, there's this amazing wealth of talent in our country. Not everybody has been privileged to have the education I've had. So how do we, even as an organization, not just in the feeding of things, but how do we look differently at people? How do we provide people with an opportunity to shine, to reach their full potential within the workplace or within any way that they are touching our organization? How do we provide an opportunity for them to reach their full potential, not taking into account the education they've had? Because not everybody has had the same education. So how do we look for talent? How do we identify talent? How do we support people to reach their full potential so that they can live the life that they were born to live? And how do we really address inequality through all the measures? So through the way that we provide skills development, through these feeding programs, and through any other way that business can play a meaningful impact in actually fighting some of the social and environmental challenges that we face as a country.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the other thing for me as well, Andrew, as you're talking, and I think it's such a positive story for South Africa in the midst of everything we're going through, the multiple commissions, and we're inundated with just the kind of horror of the day-to-day existence for ordinary South Africans, whether they're struggling for work, whether they're affected by crime, whatever it may be. I think this is such an important story. I've come to this idea over the last couple of weeks that there is almost a moral obligation now for institutions and organizations like yourself. There's a moral obligation to have a story strategy where we now have to intentionally flood not just the ecosystem, the social ecosystem, but we have to flood that even through our suppliers. We have to flood them with stories of positive success, stories of change, because the more you hear it, the more it becomes the norm. Tell me a little bit about how you see the power of stories, and how do you share the success of such a campaign in a meaningful way that every customer now knows you've contributed to this, you've changed the lives or helped change the day-to-day existence of someone else. How does your suppliers now, what is the story strategy to make sure that, yes, it is success, it is a massive milestone. 16 million meals is not a small feat by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, you don't want it to die down next week.
Yeah, it's such a great question, Sam. I love what you're saying. And I think, you know, one of the challenges we have in South Africa is that people become numb to some of the social issues we have. You know, sadly, we live in a country where you stop at a traffic light and, you know, it breaks my heart that there are people with signboards, you know, who are hungry, who are looking for money at every traffic light you stop. And the impact of that then is I think that for many people, they become numb to it. They become immune to it. They stop seeing it. And, coupled with that, there's just so many negative stories that come through the press. So the work that you guys do, for example, in highlighting positive stories, I think has a fundamental role to play. And I think when people start to see good news and we can start to penetrate through that numbness, and we start to give people, they move from apathy to there's nothing I can do, there's no point, there's so much poverty, et cetera, which is kind of becomes part of the story we tell ourselves, to actually, wow, organizations and individuals and community groups and businesses are making an impact. And actually, if we all get involved, we can fundamentally change lives. And that's why we get out of bed in the morning, is how do we fundamentally change lives? And you're absolutely right. It's not just about the 16 million meals that are raised now. It's how do we use this as a springboard now through storytelling. And storytelling, I think, the danger of storytelling sometimes is that it's got to be authentic storytelling. Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes maybe corporates have let themselves down a little bit. But I think what we're noticing more across the board is more people wanting to get involved in the story, and not just to tell the story, but be a part of the story. So like, for example, in this campaign, we actually went out to even our landlords and we said to our landlords, get involved. We weren't sure what the response would be, but the response was fantastic. I think we raised like nearly 1 million meals just from our landlords. So what does that say to me? That says to me that if we are able to tell a story, a positive story, if we are able to penetrate through the numbness of, and through the apathy, then actually, if we get to people's hearts, there's a deep willingness and desire to make a difference, to contribute, and to be a part of a positive story that is actually genuinely making a difference.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it is so important. For me, I believe it's part of our human rights. We need access to information, and we need to know who's doing what so that we can make informed choices. As we wrap up, I want to get a sense from you, and just for our listeners and our readers, because we will transcribe this conversation into written form. What is the big picture thinking for food lovers? Because I take my family there, I go there. I've got it's a beautiful concept. But I think sometimes, as somebody who's a social impact journalist, I am fortunate enough that I get to have conversations with people like you across different brands. But maybe take us into your confidence. What is the big strategy with food lovers in terms of its social impact and in terms of the role it sees, or it's potentially maybe it's even its theory of change?
Sure, that's a wonderful question, and actually that comes directly from one of the co-founders and our CEO, Brian. And a few years ago, we went through a process of really looking at what is our purpose. And we came up with all these clever slogans and all these things that people head office jockeys do. Patted ourselves in the back. And then we didn't really. What came out wasn't amazing. I thought it was, but our colleagues didn't. And so we went back to Brian and we said, okay, why have you done this? Like, you've set up this incredible business. In 33 or 34 years, we've grown from, him and his brother, Brian and Mike, to 23,000 people, but why? What is the why? And we kept asking him, like a small kid, but why? And then eventually Brian just, said the words, they probably were a little bit. But I'm used to that by now, so it's fine. And Brian eventually went, I just want to change life. And when he said that, that was kind of the deepest truth I felt in what sits in his heart, is changing lives. And I think that is the philosophy that sits behind so much of what we do now, is how do we change lives? Not just directly through ourselves, but through our suppliers, by using the power of business to really effect positive change in our country and in our world. I think it's fundamental. I think, something I talk about a lot is the old style of kind of corporate social responsibility in the old days was, well, let's do everything a little less badly. We'll reduce a bit of carbon. We'll write a few checks here and there. We'll reduce our waste. But the reality is that more people in this world doing things slightly less badly doesn't actually create the step change that is needed to create a more beautiful world, a more equal world, a greener world. And I think that's the journey that we're on, is how do we really kind of think differently about how business can be, how it can interact with society, so that business can be, so that communities and the environment can flourish through the power of business, not in spite of business. And I think that's been the fundamental difference, and it's been anchored in this key philosophy of changing lives.
Andrew Millson, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I know we've got Bragg coming up, and at Bragg we will hear from food lovers, and hopefully you guys will come and brag on stage. I know I've heard from your team you can't make it, but you'll have a rep from food lovers
that
will
right.
come and tell our audience. We've got hundreds in attendance to hear just the amazing story of food lovers and how you think about your theory of change. Really appreciate it, and congratulations on hitting 16 million meals. That's ridiculous.
It is, isn't it? It feels ridiculous to say, but thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone in the business at Food Lovers, but also all our customers, our suppliers, our partners, and everyone who's been involved in this campaign, because it is remarkable and it is a great story. And just also to you, Samm, for, how the way that you guys go and look for these stories and highlight stories and create a wider narrative in our country that is based on positive news, that actually inspires people to do more and to be more. So thank you guys so much for that. It's so necessary and it's so appreciated.
No, I appreciate you acknowledging that. But also, more importantly, I think our mission is very simple. There are people that are driving these campaigns. There are people that are obsessing about how to change the lives of other people that they've never met, not even their neighbors, not even part of their friendship circle. And our mission is really, in 2026, more than it's ever been, is to flood the news system with these stories, to show these extraordinary individuals and institutions. And be honest, we also come under flack for, but you're only asking them positive stories. Why didn't you ask about that? We do get that a lot. But that's not the mandate. That's not the mandate of what we do. There's enough platforms out there that will tell you whether this institution is not doing what it's meant to do. We think that it's important to also show the other side. And I am always grateful when people like you that are very busy are willing to talk to us.
No, thank you so much, Samm. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. That's Andrew Millson, who's the head of sustainability at Food Lovers Market. They have done something crazy. You've heard him talk about the 16 million meals, but you can actually go to their website, go to their platform, check out what they do, because there's just so much more. The feeding program is one aspect of it. They've actually got this really, really cool program called Seed for Change that they do on a yearly basis, where they literally, it possibly could be you actually, literally create opportunities for people to find their products into their stores. But it's not as simple as that. I'm oversimplifying it. It's a lot more complex than that. They take them through an entire process. So I just want you to get a sense that when you walk into a Food Lovers store, a Food Lovers Market store, you're not just walking into a shop. You're walking into an ecosystem, a platform, a place where people literally think about how are we going to change the lives of others. So next time when you walk into a Food Lovers store, go and have a chat to any of their staff members. Bigger smiles, brighter smiles, they're fully engaged, fully involved. And and maybe when you have that conversation, when you walk up and you want to find out a little bit more, you'll be what they call a conscious consumer, because now you're consciously buying from a store that's doing good in the community. You can go to our platform, www.socialtv.co.za, for all these positive stories. You can also follow our socials as we do updates, have meaningful conversations. We've got this Bragg event coming up on the 12th to the 14th of August, which will be at UJ. Obviously, it's only for our South African audiences. It is in Johannesburg, in Gauteng. So if you find yourself in South Africa, in that part of the world, on the 12th, 13th, and 14th, you're more than happy to go to our platform, to UJ's platform, register. It's an absolutely free event. We're going to hear from exciting brands, doing amazing things in this landscape, in the South African context. But they'll be talking about the social impact projects that they have pushed, piloted, it's worked, and they'll be sharing the successes of those programs and the lives that they've been able to impact. So it's going to be 3 days of feel good engagement, feel good experiences, conversations with people in the know, and I absolutely urge you to come, because I think it's going to be a game changer for your organization if you bring your team. This year we've encouraged not just the leaders of the institutions to come, but also their teams to represent the institution, because I think sometimes the value gets lost if you just focus on the leader, but bringing the leadership team can add massive value. So yeah, we expect to see you there. We are going to keep on posting these conversations. It is conversations that we have with interesting people on a regular basis. We hope that you'll follow this journey, that you'll like, you'll subscribe, and you'll engage with the content.